I'm a big fan of solo games because sometimes I don't want to wait around for JD while she's deep in thought about her next move. I also prefer narrative campaigns over beat your own score, which I just don't find as interesting.
So when Storyfold Wildwoods came out, it immediately caught my eye. A gameplay focused around dice and mitigation, designed for solo with great artwork, and it's a self-contained campaign? Heck yeah! In Storyfold Wildwoods, you're playing as Luma, a young girl living alone in the woods. Well, not quite alone, because she's got Braum, a great big bear to watch over her, and Eek, her squirrel companion. In fact, Luma's got a lot of friends in the forest, which is why she feels responsible to find the cause of the shadows corrupting everything in the wild woods. The game is really simple to set up. The storybook unfolds to become your play area, and each scene is simply the next page in the book. You get some dice, some tokens, your standard action cards, and a deck of cards for your chapter. That's it. At the bottom, your action cards form the river. On your turn, you can choose any number of dice and roll them for a specific action. At the bottom, your action cards form the river. On your turn, you can choose any number of dice and roll them for a specific action. The number above the card is a threshold for what a success is. So if I roll 3 dice and they're all 4 and above, then I get 3 successes. I can spend my successes to explore a matching location on the scene as long as I have enough successes. I can also use the abilities described on the actions. Regardless, the used actions go to the end of the river. As you go deeper into the wildwoods, you encounter creatures afflicted with shadows. These clog up your river and make it harder to complete your actions. They'll also damage your spirit at the end of your turn and have other nasty side effects. To manage these creatures, you can stun them with light to avoid damage for 1 turn. But to make them go away, you have to heal them, which usually requires more successes.
If your spirit runs out, well, you won't lose the game immediately, but you will take some ailments that make it harder to continue.
Also, if you take too long to meet the scene's goal, then the shadow will reach the center marker and, well, what fairy tale ends with the shadow winning? All of these rules are explained to you in the prologue, which is an interactive learn to play, and is actually very good. It helps that the rules are quite simple, but the prologue gets you right into the game from the very first minute.
And don't worry, the rules reference is clear and it's easy to skim if you need a clarification later. As for the gameplay, it's no secret that luck is a big component. After all, everything you need needs a decent die roll. However, Wildwoods comes with a lot of ways that you can mitigate this. Obviously, the start of the river makes it quite likely to succeed when you roll a d8, but you can also get these crystal tokens, which are automatic successes. You get these from exploring locations, healing creatures, or even from one of your own actions. The exploration cards can also have rerolls or other one-time actions to help, if you're able to avoid the negative banes in the deck. So, even with a seriously unlucky person like me, Storyfold's gameplay was quite manageable. And this system is surprisingly crunchy. There's just enough things happening every round that you're looking for the most optimal play, from the creatures coming out to attack you, to the optional locations that might give you a bonus later, to the positions of the action cards on your row. The crystals carry over from scene to scene, so maybe you greed a little bit to try to make the next scene easier. Honestly, I found Wildwoods to be a little bit too easy. I was okay with this because I don't really want Luma and Braum to be on a knife's edge in my story. But for those of you who prefer a nail-biting thriller instead, the optional challenge cards add restrictions that ramp up the difficulty. So there are 5 chapters in the game, and each chapter has about 3 to 4 scenes. I love that each scene takes only about 15 minutes, so you can play a bunch back to back. Or you can play one here and there because setup and takedown is like a minute max. The save tray lets you store the exact order of the action cards, the crystals they had, and the relevant decks as is. The hardest part is sorting the 3 types of tokens, which is to say, not hard at all. Now, where the amazing art might draw you in and immerse you, the writing is probably going to disappoint you. Luma's coming of age story will probably not grip you in the way you want. I think the writing is tailored for a young adult audience, and sadly, I'm just a little too old for this writing style. It's not a bad story, just not one that I think is memorable. And it wouldn't be right for me to ignore the elephant in the room, the replayability. Narrative campaigns are typically not replayable, and unfortunately, Storyfold Wildwoods is not an exception. There are very few branching paths, and the game aggressively fails forward, which means that even when you fail a scene, you typically progress to the next scene with very few penalties. So on your first playthrough, you'll likely have seen 90% of what Wildwoods has to offer. You can always restart and use the challenge cards for a more difficult playthrough,
Or you can try to go through the paths you haven't seen before, but I don't think you'll be playing this game more than twice.
So I don't regret buying Storyfold Wildwoods. The charming art and the crunchy gameplay satisfied me enough to overlook the weaker story and the lack of replayability. But I would strongly recommend playing Island and Something Shiny first. The core resource management is just as crunchy with much less randomness, and the story encourages multiple playthroughs with its branching options and endings. I've also enjoyed the Spire's End series with its darker tone and writing. All the Spire's End games have multiple endings, and although they're all dice checkers, they have similar levels of strategy baked into its mechanics. Wildwoods is a good game, but what I'm really excited to see is the next game using the Storyfold system. I think the system has so much potential, and I can see it growing in complexity, depth, with more nuanced story in its future entries. Wildwoods may not have captured my heart, but it's captured my interest in what I hope is a long series of Storyfold games.